Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz guitarist Henry Robinett on Standards Volume 2 that will come out in 2021. This is our second interview during this global pandemic. In the summer, we talked about Volume 1, and now he has a new one that's coming out that is along the same ilk, but has some differences. We continue to talk about the music, the pandemic, current affairs, and a little bit more. Dig in.
You know, trying to figure out what my next move is.
I hear you. That's the name of the game in this very surreal year.
How are you doing?
Oh, I'm all right, man. It's, you know, they got a monopoly on all this, so you got to make it as good as you can.
Yeah, no kidding. Yes.
But, you know, you're doing good. You got Volume 2 that's coming out of your standards.
Yeah. I'm excited. I wanted it to come out sooner, and now I'm worried that it's coming out. It may be too soon because I'm kind of still in the mode of Volume 1. You know.
Well, I guess if there's any kind of thing that's emblematic of 2020 is getting music out to people. So probably if it's fast-tracked, that this would be the right year to do it. Yeah,
no kidding. I feel that. I definitely feel that. I mean, other than that, I still have my band that rehearses once a week, and it keeps my creative juices flowing. We can do it, you know, safe distance, and you know, have masks on, and it just kind of keeps my hand in creating. I can write music. I'm doing some just kind of rehearsing the band and doing some tributes, you know. So I did a bunch of Keith Jarrett tunes and Chick Corea, and doing some Ralph Tao now, and you know, it's exciting. It's just, and of course I'm writing, so that's the great thing. And I think the secret to all of it is just to be creative with this COVID thing.
You know, I was talking to Maxine Gordon, and we were talking about the notion of, you know, creativity during this time for the jazz world. You know, maybe new idioms or new things could be created. And she was one of the very few people this entire time during the pandemic that kind of said, you know what, maybe we should go back and look at the masters like Louis Armstrong and some others like that. And I think about your standards. I think about what you're doing. And what do you think about that notion between the world of creating new and the old world?
I think jazz is something that's been built on standards. So even when we go back, I mean, I'm not particularly fond of going back and necessarily emulating styles, but there's a lot of gold to mine in those hills, you know. There's a lot to be learned. It's kind of like that's what Wynton has been doing for the past 20, 30 years, you know, going back to Duke and Louis Armstrong. And that's fine. I personally like to, you know, I think all art exists in the era that it was created. You know, so even if we go back and play the standards of the 30s and the 40s, it's going to sound like now, or it should, you know. And anytime, I think, you know, when I was teaching a jazz history class in college and university, I would tell the students to, you know, really just go back. Music is a snippet of history, and you can read the words, but it's a much different thing to listen to the music. If you have the ability to listen to the music of the day, then you get an encapsulation of the emotion and the creativity that, you know, how people were really feeling and living. And I think the same thing applies to standards. Absolutely.
So we kind of talked early on in the pandemic, and I think at that time it was materializing in a way that we thought would be different right now. How has kind of the way you're viewing the world and life and your music changed as we kind of have gone past an election and some pretty heavy racial unrest in this country and some things that are really deep?
Boy, that's a heavy one, Joe. I mean, in a certain sense, my personal life has been great. I enjoy. I'm just here with my wife, and my music is first and second and foremost in my life, other than my family. But in terms of what I see, what has happened with the George Floyd thing and the John Lewis, and I have a bunch of T-shirts that are John Lewis Good Trouble and Black Lives Matter, and it has really affected me deeply, and I think it's affected most people deeply, particularly those whose lives it crosses. And I think jazz in particular is a real interesting place because, I think pretty much inarguably it was created out of the African American experience. It doesn't mean that only African Americans can legitimately play it. I've never believed that. But the struggle and the bordellos and the speakeasies and the blues and the red light district and the glory of the Harlem Renaissance, it was all really in bop and trying to create something that couldn't so easily be copied and absconded with. It's kind of brought home a lot of things for me that we aren't as far along as we thought we were. Certainly, we're not as far along as I thought we were. And even in the jazz world, there's a lot of racial undercurrent, unspoken problems. I sometimes I look at the bands that are out there, and they're all of one race. I go, well, what's up with that? Or black people have in some cases kind of moved on. I think black folk in general, every generation, we just need to create our own. We're gonna, okay, so that's what mom and dad used to listen to. I'm not doing that. I'm kind of creating my own thing. But obviously for me, it has formed the backbone of my life. And, but yeah, I've seen a lot of problems that just make me scratch my head.
Personally, me too. I really thought that we had come farther than this. I thought after especially 8 years of someone that was so good at governing like Obama that we had hit some things, but I'm starting to believe that really what was happening in this country is that it was seething on the underbelly and it was getting hidden and it needed some level of, some spark, and it was going to come out. But, I don't know. I think probably too, the planet being at a pause and not having distractions have probably brought lots of things to the surface that have been kind of ignored because everybody's running so fast, and
right.
It needs to be confronted and it needs to be taken care of.
Yeah, it is really what this whole country is about. I think the subject matter of white supremacy, racism, inequality has been at the forefront of this nation from the beginning, and it's just created problems because it hasn't been confronted, it hasn't been faced, and it's just a terrible problem. And it's kind of like most of us, most black people have been saying for years, hey, look, this is not right. And then we get thrown certain phrases like, oh, you're playing the race card now. And the silver lining of the George Floyd thing is that now people can see there are problems. And this is this is a serious matter, and it's not going to. And for years, it was just swept under the rug because there was a wink, wink, and nod, nod, and I think people who had racial issues, they didn't even realize they did. But there's this great thing, and I really think racism is kind of a kinder way of using the term white supremacy, and therein lies the problem. And I think we will get on the other side of it. And I think Obama, for sure, created a lot of anxiety with people who felt that there shouldn't be a black person that should have that much power. And whereas I really thought, on the one hand, hey, we're moving. We're doing great. Look, those are the dying breath of that old Southern racist kind of tradition, and it just invigorated them. And by the time they could speak loud, I mean, Trump gave them permission to speak. Whether I don't know whether he is racist or not, but he certainly has opened the door and validated the white supremacists, the Proud Boys, and all those guys. And they certainly feel a comforting home under this administration. And, I have no problem speaking out. I just, a person must have integrity, and a person must believe in what he believes in, particularly when it pertains to human rights. And as far as I'm concerned, none of this had anything to do with politics. There is something that has changed, and some political parties have decided to take on the subject of race on either side of it, but it's not a political thing. Each party has owned it in opposite ways over the years. As far as I'm concerned, it's a humanitarian issue, and anyone who believes in the subjugation of people is not a friend of mine. But it's a humanitarian issue.
You're bringing up a lot of interesting points that I thought about too. I wasn't quite sure when he got into office is where exactly he was at. I mean, he plays a very, very clear image game, but I think there's a part of this too that 2020 has just really dug in and made people some things that they maybe didn't think they were. So, I'm hoping that as we turn the page on a new year, and I guess that's my next question to you, as we go past 2020 into 2021, what do you see as kind of the revival and your hopes for getting back on stage, for things to start getting into more and more live activity?
I think great art seems to always rise like a phoenix out of despair, out of terrible times. And the last few years, particularly 2020, have been just the most gruesome in our history, at least for a very long time, since the mid-1800s at least. There was a lot of crazy stuff that happened in the 60s, and I'm old enough to have been around as a young'un in those days. But there's a whole collection of different categories of stuff, from COVID to George Floyd to all kinds of stuff. And I think I have a feeling we are headed to another renaissance, and of the arts. And I think what has happened with a lot of the artists, like myself, we find other creative outlets, for myself. And a lot of guys are doing streaming concerts and this kind of thing. I haven't really done any of that stuff, but I have a studio and my guys come over and write music and play. I think on the other side of this, there's going to be an audience that's going to be desperate to actually leave cautiously and come and hear some real music. Go to the theater. There's a place in town that the only gig that I've played is they're calling it the social distance theater, where they've converted this parking lot into an actual theater, and they have tables and that kind of stuff out there, and we play. We played it 2 or 3 times out there, and it's great. But I think it's going to be good for us. Those clubs, those venues that can survive, will, I think, be rewarded. And I think the artists who survive will be rewarded. I'm ever hopeful, Joe. I'm ever hopeful. I'm the optimist.
Well, and I think that's the main thing out of all this. That's the only thing that you can really hold on to, because all I keep hearing is, this too shall pass. But
yeah.
I don't know if we've ever gone through anything that we've had to wait this long for. And, because I remember when this started, I remember telling my wife, the whole global economy is lurching on this, and a lot of people in charge aren't going to watch this fall. But biology will ultimately win, because you can't develop something that fast, and you can't fast track anything. And that's just it. So you have to wait it out. And at this point, we've been waiting so long, I think there's kind of a surreal nature of everything, thinking, man, will we actually get there? And we will, but we've been away from March 13th for so long. The rearview mirror is so full of things that we can't even see the beginning of it.
And I think Americans, by nature, are very stubborn. We're a stubborn culture. And so it's going to be hard. It is proving hard to get a lot of us to abide by rules that are not legally etched in stone, but they're rules of social intelligence. And people will say, well, look, you're closing the barber shops down, you're closing the nail salons. Oh yeah, and that's the sickness is spreading now. Explain that. Well, yes, we just came out of Thanksgiving and Christmas, and people decide that they're going to travel anyway, and that's why things are spiking. But sometimes it's hard to get people to see the cause and effect of things. They want to be so entrenched in they have to be right about something on whichever side it is. And that is the real problem. I mean, instead of being right, why don't you just kind of look at the information and see what benefits the most people, as opposed to the one or, your little buddies. So, yeah, it might take us a while. I heard someplace that France has really seriously buckled down, and as much as we think certain segments of the country have enlisted these strong stay-at-home orders, nothing compares at all to what some countries like France have done.
Yeah, and I've heard that too in a lot of parts of the world. I mean, I remember going into the summer, there was places like Finland that said they were going to end up having concerts with 500 people socially distanced, and there was things that were going to start happening. And of course, the surge started happening all over the world again. So I did read an article about how China has it under control and how China has maintained control, and a lot of it is experience. They've been through this before. They're used to wearing masks. They've gone through pandemics. When they went through COVID-17 and 18, they lived it. We did.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
So they've had outbreaks. They know what to do. There's a generational knowledge base that we don't have here. So I think they're more willing to adhere to avoiding it. So it's interesting to look at it from that global perspective.
Right. And I'm still optimistic about the future, and I think 2021 will eventually turn the page, and we'll be doing better. It might get a little worse before it gets better, but at least we have the vaccines now, and so that's really good.
Henry, I think there was questions as far as, can we rendezvous and hash it out? I think we did okay.
Yes, I think so.
So, hey, it's great to talk with you. Hopefully we can make this a regular thing. And, maybe for whatever reason down the line, I'd love to see you live play. But at any rate, good luck with Volume 2. Stay safe, and Godspeed to our recovery.
Thank you, Joe. I love it. I would love this to be a regular thing.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in San Francisco, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Henry for his time, cool, and stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.